This is Matthew Cratter from Trade University, and today I want to talk about Bitcoin for beginners here in 2023. If you still don't understand what this Bitcoin thing is, I think you'll find this video helpful. Now, I first heard about Bitcoin in 2011 from a friend, and I thought about buying $10,000 worth of it at the time when you could still buy Bitcoin for about $1 per Bitcoin. Now, today that 10,000 Bitcoin would be worth over $200 million. So I really missed out big time. But here's the good news. We're still really early here in 2023. And I think that Bitcoin will continue to appreciate quite a bit in value for the rest of our lives. I think you're going to become quite wealthy buying Bitcoin in 2023. But as we're going to see in this video, that's actually the least interesting part of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a lifeline for humanity and it has much larger and more interesting social implications. So why didn't I buy Bitcoin in 2011? Well, for one thing, I thought I was too smart for this kind of thing. I'd already been in the markets for over 15 years, and I had a strong finance background, having worked for a prominent multi-billion-dollar hedge fund. So I knew a lot about finance, and I considered myself just too smart, quote unquote, too smart to be fooled by something like Bitcoin. It sounded scammy. It sounded like a Ponzi scheme. It was definitely too volatile for me, and I was certain that it would never succeed. So unfortunately, I passed judgment on something without putting in even a few hours of research and learning exactly how Bitcoin works and how the Bitcoin ecosystem works. And that was, in retrospect, obviously a big mistake. So here's the thing. Bitcoin has had a market cap in the hundreds of billions of dollars for many years now. It keeps crashing and dying, and you can read an obituary of Bitcoin almost every day in your local newspaper or website. But the funny thing about Bitcoin, after it crashes and quote unquote dies, it keeps rising from the ashes and then coming back and eventually hitting new all-time highs again, usually within a couple years. Now, people compare Bitcoin to the tulip bubble, but the thing about tulips and the tulip bubble back in Europe was the tulip bubble popped and never came back. Bitcoin keeps coming back, which suggests that there might be something there. It looks actually a lot like Amazon, for example, which basically crashed, went down 90% from 2000 to 2002. And then unlike the tulip bubble, Amazon came back and obviously went on to hit many multi-year new highs for many years. So Bitcoin too keeps coming back, which suggests that there is something there. It's a little bit more like Amazon than like tulips. And so I think we all need to be humble, and this is what my past with Bitcoin has taught me in rejecting Bitcoin in 2011. We all need to be humble in the face of things that we don't understand, especially if something is a new technology like Bitcoin. And the fact that Bitcoin is still worth hundreds of billions of dollars, even after the brutal bear market that we've been experiencing, suggests that there might be something there that is worth looking into. But if Bitcoin is this fraudulent thing, it just for some reason never goes to zero. It can't seem to go to zero. So I think that's an interesting thing to investigate. So what is Bitcoin exactly? Bitcoin is a new kind of money that is very special for three reasons. The first reason is that Bitcoin was not issued by a government or by a corporation. And if you think about it, almost every money you've ever encountered was issued by usually a government, but in some cases a corporation as well. Bitcoin is a new neutral form of money that cannot be manipulated by government officials or corporate insiders or insiders of any kind or anyone else. There's nothing else like this out there, not Ethereum, not Cardano, not these other cryptocurrencies that try to say that they are neutral and decentralized like Bitcoin. And when you do the work, you'll see that this is the case. So that's the first reason that Bitcoin is a very special new kind of money. The second reason is that anyone can send Bitcoin to anyone else in the world. In other words, P2P or peer-to-peer, without using a third party like a bank or other financial services company. And this is also very unusual. We're used to having to ask permission from Wells Fargo or Bank of America, for example, to move our money around, or PayPal or Venmo, etc. But with Bitcoin, anyone can send money to anyone else in the world without using a third party. And the applications of this are almost infinite, as we're going to see. The last really interesting thing about Bitcoin is that its supply, its future maximum supply, is capped at 21 million coins or 21 million Bitcoin. Now, it's first difficult to understand how this cap is enforced, but you have to trust me on this for now. It has a credibly enforced future supply. And so Bitcoin is in many ways scarce, like something like gold, like a precious metal. But the interesting thing is you can also zap it anywhere in the world over the internet, which you can't do with physical gold or silver. Because Bitcoin is not issued by governments or controlled by governments, we don't have to worry about them printing a lot more of it as well. So when central banks print more US dollars, more euros, or more Australian dollars or Canadian dollars or other fiat currencies, it makes all the existing money worth less, including the money that's in your pocket and in your bank account. And this is why things cost more over time. You've probably seen this chart of the falling purchasing power of the US dollar. Back in 1913, a dollar, what the equivalent of a dollar today, was worth $26.14. And as the dollar has been devalued through central bank money printing, we experience this as inflation. So again, a dollar in 1913 had the same buying power as $26 in 2020. So for example, back in 1913, you could buy 30 Hershey's chocolate bars for just a dollar. Today, that will cost you $26. So we can see how fiat currencies, even very strong, relatively safe fiat currencies like the US dollar, fall in value over time in terms of purchasing power. So for example, when I was a kid in the 1970s, a Big Mac cost about 50 cents. Today it costs about 10 times that, or close to $5, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, depending where you are. And this is not because the burger is that much higher quality today. In fact, it's probably the opposite. It's actually because the US dollar always loses purchasing power over long periods of time, over multi-year periods of time, or over decades. In 20 years from now, it's quite likely that a Big Mac will cost more than $30. So this becomes a question for people who want to retire. How do you protect your retirement savings from inflation like this? None of us can work forever, so we need to set aside some money for our future selves, or maybe for our descendants, our children or grandchildren. So how do we make sure that that $5 that we set aside today in our savings or in our retirement savings will still buy us a Big Mac in our old age? Now you could put that $5 into gold, but gold has not been a good inflation hedge for the past 14 years, really since 2010 or so. You could invest that $5 into real estate, but then you have to deal with tenants, maintenance costs, insurance, property taxes, etc. Also, it's impossible really to buy any real estate for small amounts of money like $5. And we want retirement savings to be opened up to all the people of the world. You can invest that $5 into bonds, but they don't pay enough interest to keep up with inflation. The interest rate on the bonds is always below CPI or whatever. You could invest that $5 into stocks, but there's no guarantee that the companies that you invest in will still be around in 20 years. What if you buy the next Xerox or the next Kodak or Blockbuster or some other company whose products have become obsolete over time due to technological change? Now, you could buy a stock index fund or a stock mutual fund, but there's no guarantee that the US stock market will still be around in 20 years. So for example, in the 20th century, the German and Russian stock markets went to zero a few times. And so even holding an index fund in one of those countries at that time, if they had existed, would not have helped you there. But if you cannot trust the stock market, which is so volatile, the question always is, then why would you want to trust something even more volatile like Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is volatile over shorter periods of time, but it actually has a very different path over longer periods of time, thanks to its fundamentals. And those fundamentals are Bitcoin is scarce. There's just 21 million coins that can be made or mined. Bitcoin cannot be seized if you hold it the right way. Bitcoin cannot be censored. Bitcoin cannot be controlled by anyone except you. If you hold bonds or stocks or money in a bank, those things can all be frozen, especially during a crisis. Even if you haven't done anything wrong, bad things can happen like that. But when you hold Bitcoin, it's a bearer asset like gold, and you can hold it yourself. You don't have to hold it in an account somewhere, or you don't have to hold it in a bank vault. For example, I could put $1 million worth of Bitcoin into what we sometimes call a brain wallet and walk across any border. All I need to do is memorize 12 words, and I can access my Bitcoin on the other side of that border. I can also zap some Bitcoin to people who need it in South America or Africa and not have to deal with Western Union and the huge fees that come with remittances. I can send Bitcoin to my future self by holding it and rest assured that it will keep its purchasing power over long periods of time due to its scarcity. So Bitcoin is a wonderful asset to hold for retirement if you live in a relatively stable part of the world like the US, Europe, Canada, Australia, Japan, etc. Bitcoin is also a wonderful asset to hold if you live in a part of the world that has less strong property rights, higher inflation, more political instability. And as we've seen, and as we may see, these more relatively stable parts of the world like the US, Europe, Canada, Australia, Japan, things can always change, especially over decades, and these could become places that have less strong property rights, much higher inflation, more political instability. But if you are already living in one of these countries like Nigeria, for example, Nigerians are finding Bitcoin extremely useful in the economic crisis that they're going through and the money crisis. And I'll link to this article below if you want to read more about that. As we said, Bitcoin is an easy and low-cost way to send remittances to other countries, and you can bypass greedy companies like Western Union. Bitcoin is a life raft for refugees who no longer need to leave their savings behind when they flee their country. They can bring their savings in Bitcoin in a brain wallet, and they don't have to carry anything. They can just have it in their head. And so you can think of all the instances in history where this would have been very, very useful, especially the exodus out of Germany and the exodus out of Russia during the world wars. Bitcoin is also a life raft for those who choose to remain in an unstable country and they want to hide their savings from an authoritarian ruler who wants to confiscate it or protect it, or they want to protect it from high inflation. We saw a recent example of that in late 2022 and early 2023 with the Lebanese pound collapsing. And if you were holding your wealth, your savings in Bitcoin as opposed to Lebanese pounds, you were able to weather this crisis quite well, whether you left the country or whether you chose to stay behind. We can see here a chart of Bitcoin denominated in Lebanese pounds, and even though Bitcoin has been going down in terms of currencies like the Canadian dollar and the US dollar and the euro, we can see how much it spiked during the Lebanese pound during their financial crisis. So this was a very good life raft for the Lebanese who are able to use it. Now, you may have heard people say bad things about Bitcoin. Bitcoin wastes energy, it's bad for the environment, it can be destroyed by a quantum computer, it's not scarce because it can be cloned, it's for criminals, it's a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid scheme, it's too volatile, it's a bubble, it has no intrinsic value, it's manipulated by whales, it's controlled by XYZ government, it's controlled by the Bitcoin miners, it's controlled by the Bitcoin developers, governments can ban Bitcoin. And the list really goes on and on. Now, these are all objections that I used to have as well, but I can assure you that if you put in the time, you will see how ridiculous each of these critiques actually is. They sound pretty smart when you first encounter them, but almost all of them are completely ridiculous. There's this tendency for people new to Bitcoin, and I was the same way, to think that they are seeing something that no one has ever seen before. But you have to understand that some of the smartest minds in the world have been trying to figure out how to break Bitcoin, trying to figure out how it fails for years and years and years, and everyone has failed. There have been many attacks on Bitcoin, yet still it's here. It's extremely anti-fragile. It's extremely robust. If you put in the time, you'll see that Bitcoin cannot be stopped or destroyed by anyone, not by any individuals or group or government. And once you understand that Bitcoin cannot be stopped, it gets really, really interesting. So for example, if you have objections, if you've heard things about Bitcoin, I'm going to give you a resource here that you can use. I'll put a link in the description notes below to all of my videos on YouTube, and there's this search box right here. So for example, if you're worried about whether quantum computing will destroy Bitcoin, you can just type in quantum and you'll see all my videos about quantum. If you want to read about intrinsic value of Bitcoin or hear about the intrinsic value of Bitcoin, you'll just type that in here. And these videos, I have close to 1,000 videos, I believe, that are on just Bitcoin. So you'll be able to find your questions answered here. And this is one way to answer this long list of objections to Bitcoin. Now, after you've put in some time doing your own research on Bitcoin, I would suggest that the best way next to learn about Bitcoin is just to buy a small amount. Just buy $1, $2, $5, $10, whatever is a small amount of money for you. Buy it on your phone using one of the apps that I'm going to recommend and start playing around with it, sending it to your friends and family, seeing how it really works. You can check out, and I'll put links in the description notes below to all these companies. Strike has a very good app for iOS and Android. Take a look at Swan Bitcoin. Take a look at River Financial. And if you want two interesting wallets as well to hold on your phone and play around with, there's the Moon wallet, Moon with 2 U's, and there's the Blue wallet, which again, I'll link to these in the description notes below. Now, here are some important concluding notes. When you're first getting started, focus on Bitcoin, don't focus on crypto. The reason for this is, as you'll see when you've done the research, as I have, is that crypto is mostly scams and unregistered securities. And we saw this in 2022 with Do Kwon of Terra Luna and Alex Mashinsky and Celsius, Sam Bankman-Fried, and FTX was the other really big example. These crypto people will try to sell you their tokens or their coins by claiming that they're harder, better, faster, stronger. They'll say things like Bitcoin is slow, Bitcoin doesn't scale. Bitcoin is old tech. Bitcoin is a pet rock that doesn't do anything, that has no uses. And as we've seen in this video, you can see that Bitcoin actually has many, many incredibly useful functions and features. But these people will say this because they want to sell you their coins. Now, crypto, unlike Bitcoin, Bitcoin isn't issued by anyone. It's not issued by a corporation or a government. But crypto, by contrast, is always issued by a small group of insiders who are pretending not to be a small group of insiders, pretending not to be a corporation, for example. And they'll do this by hiding behind complicated legal structures like foundations, or by doing their activity in another country and then bringing their tokens to the US or Europe. Governments are in the process of shutting down these schemes, as they should be, but they can't stop Bitcoin. No one can stop Bitcoin, and Bitcoin doesn't need to be stopped because it's not scammy. It's a very benevolent digital asset. So if you begin by focusing on Bitcoin and just avoid crypto for now, you will learn enough to be able to see for yourself why crypto, Web3, DeFi, NFTs, and all these other schemes should be avoided. Bitcoin is the real revolution here. Next steps, explore my Bitcoin videos on YouTube. As we said, while you're at it, I just ask you to hit that subscribe button if you have found this video helpful. And you can do that by going to this part of the screen right here and just clicking subscribe. Don't forget all the videos I have on YouTube, and again, that search, this little search function that you can do here to have all of your different questions asked. And I think as you peruse these videos and browse them, you'll find some very interesting things. For example, how Bitcoin will make housing affordable again, and various other things. For example, how Bitcoin can survive an EMP attack. Bitcoin really touches, because it's the new future money, it touches on so many areas of our lives. And when you begin to go down the rabbit hole, as they say, I think you'll learn some very interesting things. So be sure to check out all these free videos that I've done about Bitcoin on YouTube. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button, as I said. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. I hope you found this video helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.